Welcome to the On Purpose Investor podcast, show number 79, how to analyze properties the right way. But the skill set of the finances is the art of success in real estate investing. And you have to have that. And maybe you don't have that. And the best way to get that in your business is to find someone that is good at it and utilize their systems.
Absolutely.
Welcome to the On Purpose Investor podcast. My name is Eric Vogel. I'm a real estate investor, mastermind coach, husband to an amazing woman, and often my co-host, Tiffany, and father to two incredible boys. I'm on a mission to help you become a real estate investor and not only achieve seven-figure success like my wife and I did, but to do so with intention, direction, and clarity. If you want to transform your financial and personal goals, become the version of yourself you've always wanted, and reach your dream life ASAP, then you're in the right place. Thank you for deciding to hit that play button today. Now let's begin. So welcome back to the On Purpose Investor podcast. I'm your host, Eric. With my amazing, beautiful, lovely, amazing wife,
Tiffany. You didn't do this in the last one.
I know I didn't do it. I sometimes forget because I get right into like saying the things about the podcast. But this time I got my new tracksuit on. I was like in alignment with producing this episode, talking about running the numbers, and I just feel it.
You're like shiny white over there. It's like angelic.
So if you're not watching on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to that so you don't miss out on the new tracksuit vibe of Eric Vogel. I don't know if she approves or not, but either way, I'm living within.
Does it matter if I approve or not?
No, it doesn't matter if anyone approves or not, because I like the tracksuit. It's comfy. I'm always ready to go for a run or run from something. And, they're sort of inexpensive. So, if I go to a restaurant or something, get something on my tracksuit, I'll just buy a new one.
Well, yeah, you were accused of looking like you were going to rob a bank the other day, but
Always ready.
Yeah.
That's the idea. That's the ideology behind wearing a tracksuit, is that I'm always prepared.
That's how we made our wealth. Eric was robbing banks in tracksuits.
That's it.
All right.
New book releasing.
How to analyze properties the right way.
Analyzing properties is often called running the numbers. And when we first got started, I remember we dived into you dove into bigger pockets. Yeah. You're like, Eric, you're a horrible landlord. We got to figure out how to do this. And you said, hey, they actually have a lot of material on here where we can learn how to do this the right way. Let's hop on this webinar. It's on like Wednesday night. And this guy named Brandon Turner is going to be doing like a live Q&A on how to run numbers. Yeah. And when he did that, he just hopped on Zillow and pulled up a few listings, pulled up pictures, and started building out numbers on how to analyze a property.
It blew my mind because it was like we knew nothing.
No.
So it was so helpful just to get an idea of what am I even looking at?
Right.
And he just did it on the fly on a property. And he used like Zillow numbers. Mm-hmm. And it was very, very quick, what I would call back of the envelope, just a quick look. But it gets you started. And I would say there's kind of two ways to analyze a deal. And as you get better and better at it, you'll refine this. Mm-hmm. But you have your quick, like, is it a good deal or not?
Yeah.
And if it is a good deal, then you do the full analysis. I call it like the back of the envelope. Like, do the numbers just roughly pencil? And then if they do, then you go in and do the full analysis of.
Right.
So when we look at a property now, we can do a quick look to see what the comps are for rent and after repair value. Mm-hmm. And you can ballpark the renovation usually within $5,000 or $10,000. Mm-hmm. So we run with that and just get an idea, do the numbers even remotely come close?
Right.
And then from there, we would take it to the next step and fine tune it.
Absolutely.
But when you're looking at 50 to 100 properties a week, you can't run full analyses on all of them.
No. And before we dive into all of the things that should be in your numbers, anybody that comes to me and is like, hey, I want to invest in real estate, what should I do? I first tell them to build the roadmap, and then I tell them to figure out their buy box, and I tell them to start running a deal a day on everything that lies within their buy box. Now, the buy box was on our last episode that we did, and the running numbers is this one. Roadmap, we talk about it a lot throughout the process, but run a deal a day. It will take you probably 30 to 45 minutes on your first 10 to figure out how to run a deal. But once you get really good at it and it's systematized, it should take you no more than 10 minutes to truly run numbers on a deal. And if you've read our book, The Pathfinder's Journey, you'll see that Charlie and Liza, the main characters in there, trade in their nights of watching things on Netflix for nights of having like deal making competitions or deal running competitions, where they'll try to analyze as many deals as they can
and see who gets the best deal.
Yeah. And that was a fun thing to write in that book, but it's also a fun thing to do. So maybe you're in this with your spouse or your partner, or you're in this with a business partner. I encourage you. Or
just a friend from a meetup. You can do it together.
Yeah. Just go sit down somewhere like Chuck E. Cheese. I'm kidding. Don't go to Chuck E. Cheese and do it. Maybe go to the Starbucks or, a Taco Bell.
Sit at your house and they're at their house and you just message each other on what you got.
I'm always thinking about going somewhere.
And I know. I'm like, let's stay home.
When I was a kid, we went to Chuck E. Cheese a lot. So I kind of resonate with that. The rat, the pizza, the roller slide where your finger gets stuck inside of it.
Yeah. Gross.
Had a lot of injuries at Chuck E. Cheese. But anyways, do a friendly competition with yourself or with someone, and see how many deals you can run in like a 30-minute or a 60-minute period, and see who comes up with the best numbers.
Yeah, I know.
You never know. You might buy one of them.
When you're a lot of times in our typical work day, especially when you're an employee at a company, you might have 10, 15 minutes between calls. Like you don't have anything to do. So you just go scroll Facebook for 10 minutes.
Or you play backgammon on your phone.
Yeah. So what if instead of that, you were running a deal?
Who plays backgammon?
I don't know. What is wrong with you?
I don't know. I'm all over the place.
Yeah.
No,
this is my life.
Yeah, but everyone. you have time in between your obligations where you can start running deals.
Yeah. So find a way to do that in those little 15-minute breaks instead of wasting time on social media or online shopping or whatever it is you're doing. And just run a deal, or at least start running a deal. It might take you 40 minutes at starting out, but if you could maybe do all the research in that 15-minute block,
right? Get
some info, and then later you can run it even faster.
Right. So we're going to talk about all the categories that should go into running a deal. My recommendation to you is to build out some type of Excel sheet or a duplicated Word document where you can scratch on paper all the things, but a way to recreate it over and over again that you're not having to fill all these categories out every single time.
Absolutely.
So the first thing is utilities, figuring out what utilities are going to cost on this property. Yeah. And now a lot of that goes into how you're buying the property and what the use is for that property.
Right. So if you're planning to short-term rental, co-living, something where you're paying the utilities month in, month out, that's something you need to factor in.
Right.
And for us, we know roughly what it costs for the size properties we buy. So we just throw in a rough number.
Right.
At the end of the day, when you're running a deal, if it's going to make a difference for $50 a month, whether you break even or cash flow, don't do the deal.
Exactly.
Especially when you're first running the numbers on a property, you're just trying to get something in there. A lot of times I'll put $150, $200 for our market on utilities, and that covers everything. Your market might be different. If you're living there, you know roughly what you pay for your utilities. So use that as a starting point. When you're running the numbers, do a very high level initial pass and just throw some numbers on there. And if it's remotely decent, then go back and really dig in and
call the power company and see, what was the overall usage of the property over the past 6 months.
Yeah.
And they should provide you with that information.
I would look at a year because of seasonality.
Yeah.
And depending on if it has a furnace or heat pump, that could change a lot of things.
Yeah.
So just looking, you can dig really deep. Is it worth your time though? Or do you just assume it's a higher number and then if it's lower, you get more cash flow?
Absolutely. The next thing to look at is management fees, whether that's to a management company or to yourself for managing it. Now, what percentage would you normally run? Is it 10 to 15%?
10%, I think, is the standard, but it's also 1 month's rent.
Yep.
So 1 month's rent is 8.33% per year.
Yeah.
So if you, we'll talk about reserves in just a second, but if you have a management company and you expect the house to turn over every year, run it at 18%. So 10% plus that 8% for 1 month, because most management companies take first month's rent.
Yeah.
If you think it's going to turn over every 2 years, then run it at 14%. And so on. You can reduce it.
Yeah.
I would say plan for 2 years. I think that's kind of normal to have someone stay at least 2 years.
Yeah.
And if they stay longer, great.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then same with management fees, reserves. So when you're setting for reserves, you want to set aside money for big repairs, for little repairs, and for vacancy. So you're assuming every 2 years you're going to have a turnover. Assume it's going to take them a month to fill that turnover too. So you want at least 4% for vacancy, if not 8%.
Right.
We typically do 15 to 20% for our reserve fees. And that's to cover any kind of repairs on the properties. So, linky sink or toilet or some patching paint. Turnovers are a big expense when somebody moves out. So you want to make sure you're finding good tenants to go in your properties, because the cost to turnover, especially if you have a property manager, you're out a month rent to the manager because they take the first month. You're out a month of rent because you've had it vacant. And then there's probably another month or two equivalent in turnover fees. Yeah. Especially if you have to do paint and floors and all that.
Exactly.
So turnovers are bad. You want to make sure you're pricing and setting up so that you don't have a lot of turnover.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the next thing to look at is our PITI, our pity. Now, we're not calling you pitiful or anything like that. PITI is the part of your payment that you are obligated to make to either the bank or your lender. And that is the principal payment, the interest payment, the taxes, and the insurance.
Yeah. And even if you're not escrowing the taxes and insurance, you want to make sure you're setting that aside each month so you don't get hit with a big bill. So having that, even if it's not going to the bank or the lender, having it set aside in a separate bank account each month so that you have the money available when the time comes.
Exactly.
When you're building that out, you're going to need to know, how long is the loan? Is it a 30-year fixed? Is it interest only? Is it 5-year ARM? There's so many ways to go about it. No, we've done episodes talking about different loan structures.
Yep.
What's the loan amount? If you're buying it for a certain amount, you're going to also need to know how much you need to spend on rehab, which we'll talk about in a moment. At the end of the day, what's that loan amount going to be for that property? What's the interest rate?
Right.
And I know that has been fluctuating a lot and hopefully going down for us. So that has a huge swing on the cash flow and analyzing a property.
Yeah. And the last thing to include on your PITI is if you are above 80% LTV on there, you're going to have to pay for PMI, which is
private mortgage insurance.
And
that's mostly on conventional, I think.
Yeah.
We had it on my house that I bought before we got married, and we wound up doing a refinance when rates dropped to next to nothing. So I think we got a 3% loan on it and dropped that PMI.
Yeah.
But if you're buying in a way that has PMI, you want to make sure you're accounting for that in your numbers too.
Also, just a quick tip. Once your property gets to a valuation to where your loan balance is only 80% of the total value of the property, call your bank and request an appraisal to get PMI removed.
Depending on the loan type.
Well,
some of them it won't remove
VA, it's in there for life. Some FHAs are in there for life, for the life of the loan.
VA is baked in at the front, I believe, in your funding fees.
Right.
I believe it's FHA. You can't refinance out of PMI.
Okay.
So talk with a lender or a mortgage broker and understand that, because you might be better off going conventional on a 5% down payment versus a FHA 3.5% because of that PMI difference.
Yep.
That was a tangent, but
not necessarily tangent, because it does go into structuring the deal and figuring out what number structure works the best for you. The next thing to look at is your ARV. That's your after repair value. Now, I would say you may want to go on YouTube and figure out how to run comps, or you may want to talk to a real estate agent in your area. Maybe it's the agent that you use all the time to give you some type of ARV on your property. You could also request their desktop appraisals, BPOs, broker priced opinion. And you can pay someone to do a BPO on a property. And I think it's a lot cheaper than an appraisal, but you still come out of pocket maybe $200 to $300, I think.
Yeah.
But that's a way to get a really hard ARV.
Yeah, I think for us, when we were starting, I would analyze our appraisals, and I wound up building out a spreadsheet, of course, because that's who I am, and was able to basically pull comps and adjust them the way they do on an appraisal.
Yeah.
So I took it a little bit extreme, but the thing is, at the end of the day, you have no control over ARV.
Right.
And one appraiser might look at it very differently than another. Yeah. And it's really up to what that appraisal comes in. So it's really a guess.
Yep.
But have a plan if it comes in low, what you're going to do if you're planning to BRRRR.
Right. And so I know on some of our properties that we bird, we were really counting on ARVs to come in at a certain price, and some of them didn't.
Yeah.
And we had to really shift gears a few times on several properties of, oh my goodness, we really needed it to come in at 175. It came in at 160.
Right.
Are we leaving 15 grand in this deal? Or,
we did on all but one.
Right.
And it was because the appraisal came in so much lower than it should have. And we wound up finding someone to put a second on it.
Yeah.
So we have a second interest only loan, and it cash flowed fine with that second position note.
Yeah.
So that saved us from a situation. And our
Right.
plan is in time, we'll just pay that off and just keep the underlying.
Right.
But we didn't have the cash to leave. I think it was $30,000
Right.
in that deal, but had a financial friend that had a lot of money sitting in savings, not earning a lot. So it was just easier to take the money from them. And
we just called them up and offered them the going rate on what we were paying for private money. And they're like, oh my gosh, that sounds a lot better than what I'm getting in my savings account.
Absolutely.
And it's usually 3 to 5 times as much as what a general savings account would get you.
Right. And that gets into cash available.
Yeah.
How much cash do you have to put into this deal? And have backup plans. Gary Johnston says you need cash or access to cash. Right. And that's what keeps you from going bankrupt at the end of the day.
It is.
And you want to make sure as you're analyzing it, is the cash you're going to leave in it, whether it's a BRRRR or not, enough? Like, do you have enough cash to cover that cash needed?
Yeah. And do you have enough cash to hold on to that property during the time that it's going to take you to renovate it? That's called your holding costs. Right. And that's our next option here.
Yeah.
Is our holding costs. And there's a lot of things that go into holding costs. You have your cost of money. You have your
interest rate, points, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. You have your cost of utilities during the rehab.
Right.
You have all of your things that go into keeping the property up and running. Landscaping and because we were renovating a property and we didn't factor in landscaping on our holding costs. It didn't kill us. It didn't break it. But it was like the $75 every 2 weeks that we didn't factor in. There's $150 a month in holding costs we didn't account for. Right. Because if we didn't mow the grass, the city was going to shut us down.
Yeah, and it got close to that.
It did. We got a warning.
Yeah.
But thank goodness we had a good team to get out there and cut the grass.
If you're doing a longer scale renovation, you're going to need vacant insurance. And that stuff is not cheap.
It's depending on the property, it can run anywhere from $1,500 to $3,000 every 3 months.
Yeah.
So you're going to want to call your insurance agent, who should be on your team, and say, hey, I'm looking at this property. Can you give me an idea of what, a vacant express policy is on this property for 3 months? Or maybe it's a 6-month renovation. You need a 6-month figuring out.
And I would honestly go ahead and pay for the full. If you think you need 3 months, probably get 6, because a lot of times the costs run over and it's cheaper to buy the longer term instead of 2-3 months. But lessons learned in the Vogel household.
But it's not a Vogel curse.
Yeah.
It was a failure to prepare.
It was a thinking things would move faster than they did.
And they did not.
Right. So what else in holding costs? You've got insurance. You've got potentially property taxes coming up while you're renovating.
Yeah, depending on time of year. Yeah.
Let's see what else.
I think things that you may not factor in for holding costs are like, do you need to rent a porta potty? Do you need to rent a dumpster? Which might come into your rehab costs, but they need to be somewhere. Yeah. And that brings us to our next step, which is rehab.
Absolutely. Also, interest. Like a lot of times we did BRRRRs. Yeah. And that part of that holding cost was paying the interest.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure you have the cash to cover those holding costs and the rehab when you get started. Mm-hmm. So you don't wind up in a spot where you can't finish the property and get it sold or rented because you don't have cash.
Absolutely.
So right, on to rehab.
Rehab costs. This was pretty much my wheelhouse in the process. Tiffany pretty much did everything above this, and I did the rehab costs. And I honestly read several books on estimating rehab costs. Jay Scott has a great book on estimating rehab costs and really building out.
I just want to add, Jay's book was written, 10 years ago now?
Yeah, you're going to need to adjust the pricing he has in there.
I think.
But it gives you the systems you need.
And it gives you the knowledge of what all goes into a house. Right. I read it because I was like trying to understand all the components of a house, and I didn't know what soffit and fascia were.
Right.
Because why would I?
Exactly.
But reading that book really, even if you're not going to be in charge of the renovation, knowing the aspects of what's all in the house is important.
Right. Yeah, even if you're going to hire a GC and you're expecting the GC to come up with all these costs for you, read that book or read any other book on estimating rehab costs for real estate and get an idea, because you're going to want to make sure you don't get taken for a ride with your pocketbook and just taken to the cleaners because you didn't understand it. You know, you should understand the general pricing for drywalling per square foot or flooring per square foot, or, you know,
and don't pay by the building. Day for labor.
Yeah, you
for the project.
Pay for projects on a project scope, and there should be timelines on it.
Contracts.
Tiffany interviewed a really lovely lady about property or project management. Mm-hmm. She has a lot of great tools that you could implement on managing the project in rehab. But when you get this property under contract, before you get the property under contract, you need to look through the pictures really closely. And this is the back of the envelope step, right? And you're just going to look through the picture and be like, okay, new vanities throughout. All right, new flooring throughout. All right, it needs a paint job. It needs all new fixtures.
Yeah, and when you're doing that, if you don't know how much a vanity is, go on Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever your local hardware store is and get a ballpark idea.
Yeah.
Don't get caught up in that initial run of, okay, I need a vanity. I need, I don't know, faucets and fittings and all the little things that go into it.
Yeah.
Add a 20% or 30% contingency on the back end.
Yeah.
When you're analyzing properties, you're trying to look at a lot of them and not necessarily locking in the exact renovation budget.
Yeah.
Once you get, honestly, I think once you get it under contract, that's when you really want to dig in and get to the nitty gritty, like probably to the hundreds of dollars.
And that's what I was going to say is once you've done the back of the envelope rough rehab costs, and let's say you're like, hey, these numbers make sense. I'm moving ahead. I'm making an offer. You get it under contract. You have 3 to 5 days due diligence, depending on your offer. And you get in there and you take pictures of every last thing. You try your best to get whoever's working on the property, if it's you or someone else, to walk it with you. And you get out a piece of paper and you take pictures and you document every last thing that you're going to fix. And then you stay up as long as it takes to get all of your numbers on the paper.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And as you're doing video, go, half the speed you think you should?
Yeah, that's one thing we've learned is like Tiffany would go walk a property, or I would.
No, it was more me. Let's be real.
And you'd like look through the property, and the first couple that you went through is like, here's the living room, here's the kitchen, here's this closet, here's the bathroom.
And it's like hyper speed.
What is happening?
You can't see anything. Go slow, look at everything, look at the panel, look at the serial number on the water heater, like everything.
And because you're going to go back to that video multiple times, because getting back into that property after you go under contract can be really difficult. Scheduling with different contractors or scheduling with your agent,
or just getting there, the travel time to get there and getting in and scheduling all that versus just pulling up a video on your computer while you're building out your cart it's just a lot easier.
Absolutely.
And saving carts on Lowe's. Yeah. That was your pro tip.
Was. I would build out a whole cart and then I would email it to myself. And then during the email, I would label the subject, the address of that property. Mm-hmm. And let's say I go look at a house 6 months later that was so similar to this one. I just go back to that cart.
Yeah.
And I pull it up and I say, okay, I said I needed 4 light fixtures. I need 6 of those. And I would just adjust the items in the cart. And that would save me so much time of building carts.
And when you were ready to make a purchase, you forwarded that to your rep at the store and they bought it all for you.
Right. And another pro tip on that is once you forward that to the pro desk of wherever you're shopping, if you're Dan, it's probably Menards. We don't have that here down south. But you send it there and they will go out and basically bid your shopping cart against the store itself. I don't really know how they do it.
Yeah, but they get you discounts.
The maximum discount I've ever received was about 37%, which is way better than the military discount, way better than any type of 0% interest discount, whatever is out there. But they go out and they shop it and they bid it and you get the savings and they show you how much savings you're getting. And you can honestly just work with them and say, hey, here's my Gantt chart. Here's how I need the items delivered. And they'll break it up for you and deliver it to the house.
Absolutely. So a lot of time saving things there.
Yep.
So once you have all of these components, you can start really running your numbers.
Yep.
And one thing that I don't think is talked about enough in our industry is it's more than just what's the cash flow for the property. Mm-hmm. I work as a fractional CFO with Simple CFO, which we implement profit first for real estate investors. And that number of cash flow per property is what we call real revenue. Mm-hmm. But you still have taxes that you're going to have to pay, like income tax. I mean,
yeah.
You have operating expense for your business. So if you have a CPA, that has to come from somewhere. If you have software to manage your properties or to find deals, advertising, all of that overhead for the business, when you're starting out, you're paying that out of pocket. That's just the cost of starting a business.
Right.
But as your business is running and you eventually leave your job, the business, someone's going to have to pay for that stuff.
Yep.
And if you're thinking your in your pocket cash flow is the revenue rent on the property minus the pity minus reserves, you're going to be in a spot because you don't have money set aside for masterminds and seminars and travel for all of that. Shoot. And I think that was something that caught us because yes, we were making cash flow from the properties, what we needed, but that didn't account for, at the end of the day, what was in our pocket after covering all that business operating expense.
Exactly.
So that's like my soapbox that I'm probably going to die on is it's really important to make sure you're not just looking at rent minus direct costs for that property, but you're also thinking about, as you're scaling, making sure that there's enough meat to cover that operating expense.
Absolutely.
Because adding software can make your life a lot easier.
Yeah. Or hiring a VA. You know, go out and price how much a VA is. You know, I wouldn't recommend it to anyone that's not, you know, at least sustained off of their business.
Right.
Unless you have a really busy job and you have a lot of deal flow happening and you're trying to balance it all. But make sure the business can sustain that.
Right. And that's what I do, is helping people understand, do they have the money coming in to sustain hiring or adding in a different kind of software?
Yeah.
So I have some fun things in the works that we're going to announce in the coming weeks, but knowing that there's more than just the per property cash flow that comes into it, I think is life-changing, because when you're looking at your projected cash flow or what's on your, you know, spreadsheets, but it doesn't include those costs. I just had another thought. Pest control. If you have termite or other pest stuff that needs to go in. Sorry. Yep. And landscaping and other things like that. Anyways, that was a jump trash back. Yeah. Well, that's utilities though.
True.
So make sure you're setting aside a percentage for that operating expense.
Yeah.
Because it creeps up. And as you're scaling, you add more resources to help you manage everything. And you can be in a spot.
And definitely not trying to scare you out of investing in real estate at all. And because you're probably thinking, oh my gosh, I added everything up and that's like 65% of the total cash flow. There's no way anything will ever cash flow, right? There are definitely ways to make it cash flow, but that's the thing. You don't want to force it to cash flow.
Right.
You want to be conservative enough that you are not over leveraged and you're not put in a spot.
Right. Well, and I think when we really saw the impact of our real estate was after a few years. So if you buy a house and you rent it for $1,000 a month, and our market sees about 5% rent growth on average, that's $50 a year increase. Ours went up. For one, our $50 per $1,000 rent. A lot of our properties are closer to $2,000 a month, so it's $100 a year that cash flow goes up. Maybe not quite 100 because taxes will go up. You know, repair expense will go up, stuff like that. But even if it's only $70 a year, that's significant, especially once you add on 10 properties.
Yeah.
$700 a year in cash flow.
Right.
So to add to your comment of like not getting discouraged, just keep that longer term picture in mind.
Yeah.
That once you have that property, it continues to grow in cash flow.
Yeah. And eventually that property is going to be paid off and you're going to keep, 80% of the total revenue.
Right.
So
absolutely.
Just think about it like that.
Yeah. So what makes a good deal?
I think there's a lot of factors that go into figuring out what is a good deal. And there are a lot of different metrics that people say make a good deal. Some people say cash on cash. That number makes it a good deal. Some people say that the cash flow per door. Some people say, what was my impact and my net worth? We'll talk about all of these. Yeah. So the first one is cash invested or in hand.
Yeah. When we were starting out, we did a lot of BRRRRs because that was what worked in the market.
If you don't know what a BRRRR is, it's a strategy that's been existing in real estate probably forever, but it's a
flip to rent is the short. Yeah. It's basically instead of flipping a house and selling it, you just keep it and rent it out. So you fix it up and then you refinance it. So ideally, you're pulling a bunch of cash out, so you're not leaving a lot of cash in that deal.
Right.
So for us, when we were analyzing deals, we looked at how much cash are we going to leave in this at the end of the day, or are we going to get cash in our hand for doing this deal? So that was something really important when we were looking.
Absolutely. And the next one is return on equity.
Yeah.
Now, this is something that not a lot of people look at, especially when they're first getting into it, because a lot of times their equity builds over time.
Right. Let's talk cash on cash first, and then we can come to that. I think it makes more sense. So cash on cash is, what is the annual return of the monthly cash flow annualized? So let's say you make $200 a month, $2,400 a year.
$2,400 a year.
Yeah, I can't do mental math.
It's okay.
I'm super smart, but I can't do mental math. And then you take how much you have invested and find that ratio, and that's your cash on cash return.
Right.
Return on equity is the same concept, except instead of using what you have in it as that cash invested, you're looking at the equity in the property.
Right.
So the idea is, as we are looking at what properties are performing well, we're not looking at cash on cash anymore, because a lot of them, we've earned back all of the cash we invested.
So if you looked at a portfolio and said, did they get good deals? And you look at our spreadsheet and you're like, oh, they don't have any money in their whole portfolio. They have the best portfolio ever. But some of our properties underperform.
Right.
And there's no way we would know that if we were just looking at cash on cash.
Right. So our return on equity on one that we are considering selling, which we love the property, and there's a lot of factors going into the decision, is about 4%.
Right.
So could we sell that property? And this is after taking off a huge chunk to cover agent fees and, all the other expense with selling. If we sold that property and took that cash, could we invest it at 4% or more? Absolutely.
Yeah.
No doubt.
I mean, because there's, $200,000 in equity sitting in that property. Right. Now, some people may challenge us and say, well, just, get another mortgage on it or get a second position.
And we could, absolutely. The other thing I want to add to this scenario on this one particular property is we looked at the last 3 years of income on it, on just that property. And that's where we got to that 4%. We spent a lot of money repairing that sucker.
We did.
Because we didn't do a full renovation on it. So every time we had a turnover, we did a little bit more. And now 2 of the 3 units in that triplex are in great shape.
Yeah.
So the ongoing repairs for it, we don't know what it's going to be, but it's probably going to be less than it has been.
Right.
So we need to do a little bit deeper of analysis to say, okay, this is what we spent monthly on average for repairs. It's probably going to be half that.
Right.
And then come up with an adjusted return.
Yeah.
And I know that's probably way above what most people will do. I know you would never even think to do something like that.
Nope.
So that's where people like me come in. And like I said, we're going to announce something in the next couple of weeks that's going to be really cool to help look at things like that. But there's a lot that goes into it that I don't think people always think through.
No.
And in buying or analyzing your portfolio, looking at the whole picture is really important.
Right.
So if your cash on cash is not out of this world, great, but you have a property that is brand new, your repair expense is going to be so low that it will be a good deal in the long run, as long as it's cash flowing. So cash flow per door is another thing that's very important.
Absolutely. And we say per door because you may have a triplex, you may have a duplex, a quad, or you may rent by the bedroom. Yeah. And so, I mean, if we counted all the doors that we have a ton of doors, right? But it really depends on your strategy and how you want to measure if something's a good deal or not.
Absolutely. And another thing we looked at, because we were trying to do the equity ad with BRRRRs, was the impact to our net worth. Yeah. Because we wanted to grow our net worth in addition to our monthly cash flow. So if a deal it might only make us $100 a month, but if it was going to add $200,000 to our net worth, we would do it.
Especially if we left no cash in the deal.
Right. Absolutely.
Right.
Right. And you compare, okay, it's going to, if it adds 30,000 to your net worth, but you're putting 40,000 in, it's taking away from your net worth. So you just want to make sure looking at the equity versus the cash invested is really that net worth impact. It's been a while since I built that spreadsheet out, so I forgot what my formulas were.
No, and that's okay. I think the overall idea behind all of this is figuring out which metric do you want to gauge your success on.
Or 2 or 3, but because I think your cash invested, most people are going to have to look at because they don't have millions of dollars to buy real estate.
Right.
But if you don't have cash available, partner with someone.
Yeah.
half of a deal is better than none of a deal,
Yeah.
or 100% of no deal. That's the one.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. This whole, episode is trying to get you thinking about all the things that go into running numbers on a deal.
Yeah.
And like I said, I really encourage you to build out either a Word template or an Excel document. I would prefer Excel because it'll total things for you. I guess you could do that in Word. It'd be a little cumbersome.
I don't know how you would do that, but
yeah.
Anyways.
Implement a table and then build your formulas
that's
in the table in Word.
nightmare.
Yeah. But, building something so that you can keep track of all the deals you're running numbers on.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
maybe start a new tab for each.
No. Don't do
a
new tab. Do have like your property information in one, like in the rows. So you would have a spreadsheet, and in column A have what's the ARV, what's the loan amount, what's the interest rate, and so on. And then you do properties across.
Mm-hmm.
So then you can compare. And when you're looking at a deal that you analyzed one a week ago that was very similar, still analyze it separately, but then compare and see, did you learn something in the last week?
Mm-hmm.
Or is what you did a week ago accurate?
Right.
And then you can compare and really grow as you're analyzing.
Yeah. And then memorialize it. Maybe start a new page each year or each quarter.
Yeah.
And, in 5 years, go back to the deals you were running 5 years ago and maybe go look that property up.
Yeah.
See what the ARV on it is today.
Absolutely.
See, maybe it's someone in your circle that renovated that property.
Right. I'm going to spill the beans.
Yeah.
Because I'm excited about it.
Okay.
So
go ahead. Spill it.
I'm launching a toolkit, and in it is going to be a spreadsheet to help with this. So instead of telling people to go build it out, let's just hold your horses. It's coming. I've realized my purpose is this financial side of the business, and it's something that people either get or they don't get. And for the people like Eric that don't get it, I want to be there.
I am a layman when it comes to Excel charts and when it comes to finances.
Yeah.
I'm a layman, and thank God I have Tiffany.
Absolutely. So I want to make this super affordable and accessible for people. So it'll be coming out, I would say, in the next month or two, but really helping people get their real estate business started with the right financial framework.
Mm-hmm.
So more to come.
Yes. We actually pretty much designed it this morning.
Yeah.
But it is coming. And y'all, if there's one thing I can say that my success resides on, it has nothing to do with my skill set. I do have a skill set that is beneficial to our company. But the skill set of the finances is the art of success in real estate investing. And you have to have that. And maybe you don't have that. And the best way to get that in your business is to find someone that is good at it and utilize their systems.
Absolutely.
So,
and we have learned a lot of what to do and what not to do. And I'm ready to pass that on to the next group of investors.
Yeah. If you want to be the first one notified about Tiffany's program that's coming out, be sure to go on onpurposeinvestor.com and sign up for the newsletter. We will push that out through the newsletter that goes out, or join us on Facebook or Instagram. We'll be sure to post about it there.
Absolutely.
All right.
That's all we got.
That's all we got this week. Thank you for joining us on the On Purpose Investor podcast. Don't forget, I'm your host.
All right. Let's wrap this up.
All right. We'll see y'all next time. We are immensely grateful for you joining us today. If you haven't already done so, we invite you to subscribe to our show. We understand that many of you tune in regularly, but perhaps haven't had the chance to hit that subscribe button yet. Don't worry, it's effortless. It takes about 3 seconds to follow or subscribe on your platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're enjoying the show. Your support is invaluable to us and has played a crucial role in the tremendous growth of our podcast. We sincerely appreciate your assistance in any way, shape, or form. Together, we can launch this podcast to even greater heights.